What if the most primitive ancestor you ever imagined could carve peace, nurture disability, and create art, but still vanished anyway? Imagine waking up to the same fear your ancestors did: bitter cold, primal dangers, the unrelenting hunt for survival. Now imagine someone like that, Neanderthals possessing compassion, creativity, and complex social lives. And yet, they are gone. What drove them to extinction despite everything they had? This is not a tale of brutish cave dwellers who simply couldn't compete. It's a story of ingenuity, culture, empathy, and loss. Let's walk through a day, a life, an entire existence of Neanderthals and unravel the mystery of how much they were like us and whether that was enough. Around 500,000 years ago, a branch of humanity split away from our own line and began its long dance with the Ice Age. These were the Neanderthals, creatures forged not in comfort, but in the relentless struggle against frozen winds. Endless steppes and shadowed forests stretching across Europe, Western Asia, and the Near East. Their bodies told the story of survival. Stocky frames packed with muscle, wide chests, and thick bones that could absorb the brutal toll of a life lived in extremes. Even their noses carried an adaptation, broad passages that warmed the icy air with every breath. And their lives moved quickly. In Croatia, the fossilized teeth of Neanderthal children show they erupted months earlier than ours do today, a sign of faster growth. Nature had pressed them into maturity with urgency, demanding strength, resilience, and endurance in a world where hesitation could mean death. For the Neanderthals, the day likely began before dawn, when the chill of night still pressed against stone walls. Their homes were caves and rock shelters, chosen with care, places where the wind could not bite so deeply, where dripping moisture could be kept at bay. At times, they even built simple structures. Deep within Brunikel Cave, for example, they arranged broken stalagmites into circular patterns, a feat requiring fire, planning, and cooperation in utter darkness. Life was harsh, but not without comfort. Bedding was laid with hides, grasses, and straw. Clothing was stitched from the skins of animals they had hunted, each garment a shield against the cold. Fire was both tool and guardian, heat for survival, flame for cooking, light against the night. To live as a Neanderthal was to know the land intimately, which cave mouths opened safely to the east, which overhangs kept rain from soaking their makeshift beds. When we imagine Neanderthals, we often see hunters chasing great beasts across frozen plains, and the evidence agrees. Stable isotope studies of their bones show a diet heavy in protein, so rich in animal flesh that at times their chemical signatures looked closer to wolves than to us, yet they were not simply meat eaters. Trapped in the calculus of their teeth are traces of plants, nuts, seeds, and tubers. Some even reveal hints of water plants and aquatic resources, suggesting a broader palate than we once believed. Food was more than survival, it carried tradition. In Israel, archaeologists uncovered butchering sites where Neanderthals hunted the same prey with the same stone tools, but cut and prepared the meat in different ways. These differences whisper of culture, of inherited methods, of culinary choices passed from one campfire to the next. Their meals, like ours, were shaped not only by hunger, but by memory and meaning. The Neanderthals were not simply rough hunters with blunt tools. They were craftsmen of stone, masters of the Mysterian tradition. With the levalos technique, they struck flakes from a prepared core, shaping points and blades with precision. Some tools were hafted onto wooden shafts to form spears. Others were fashioned into scrapers and cutters for hide, bone, and wood. Evidence even hints at their use of bone tools, flexible instruments that served in ways stone could not. And the story stretches farther than Europe. In southwestern China, archaeologists uncovered the quina toolkit, long thought to be a European signature, dated to about 55,000 years ago. Whether carried by traveling bands, borrowed through contact, or developed in parallel, the discovery suggests that Neanderthal technology, or at least their ideas, reached across vast distances. Making tools demanded foresight. Crafting tar for adhesive or shaping a spear point through a multi-step process required planning, memory, and the ability to imagine an end before it existed. These were not the minds of brutes, but of kin capable, deliberate, and closer to us than we once dared to admit. Neanderthal life was not lived in isolation. Their world was built on small, tightly knit groups, likely extended families bound together by necessity and affection. Survival in Ice Age Europe demanded cooperation, and the archaeological record reveals something deeper: empathy. At Cova Negra in Spain, the remains of a 6-year-old child with clear signs of Down syndrome were found. That child could not have survived without the constant care of others, yet they did. For years, their community carried them, fed them, protected them. This was not mere instinct. It was compassion. Their sense of humanity also extended to death. In Tinchemet Cave in the Levant, Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens alike laid their dead to rest around 100,000 years ago. Bodies were curled in the fetal position, often dusted with ochre, sometimes accompanied by tools or symbolic objects. These gestures speak to a shared language of ritual, a recognition that life had meaning beyond survival. Here, in the dim light of the cave, Neanderthals and modern humans met in the mystery of mortality, two species, yet one impulse to honor the dead. Childhood among the Neanderthals was brief, yet it carried immense weight. Infants matured faster than modern humans, their teeth erupting earlier, signaling a quicker shift to solid foods and, with it, to greater responsibility. A Neanderthal child stepped into the rhythms of survival sooner, not as a passive dependent, but as an active participant in the work of the group. Learning came not from formal lessons, but from living. The young watched carefully as hunters tracked game, as butchers split bone and sinew, as skilled hands shaped hides and stone. Knowledge was absorbed through imitation and repetition, an apprenticeship without classrooms, taught by the very landscape and by the elders who embodied tradition. And play, too, held meaning. It was not mere amusement, but preparation. In climbing rocks, throwing stones, or staging mock hunts, children trained their bodies, tested their reflexes, and rehearsed the skills that adulthood would demand. Fossil wear patterns and ethnographic parallels suggest that even in these playful acts, Neanderthal youth were sharpening coordination, spatial awareness, and social bonds. Their games were echoes of the life-to-come serious practice, wrapped in laughter and movement. For Neanderthals, technology was not an abstract idea, it was woven into survival itself. At the heart of their world was fire, a companion as much as a tool. Flames offered warmth in frozen landscapes, protection against predators, and a steady surface for cooking. Maintaining a fire was no casual act. Embers had to be guarded, hearths tended, and flames carefully coaxed back to life. Burned bones and charred stones across their sites remind us that fire was a constant presence, deliberately used and vigilantly sustained. Clothing, too, was a technology. From animal hides, they fashioned coverings that shielded them from wind and snow. They understood which furs trapped warmth best, how to soften and process hides, and perhaps even how to stitch with bone needles. These garments were not only practical, they carried within them the memory of the hunt and the skill of the maker. And beyond necessity, Neanderthals crafted meaning. The engraved bone from Einhornhöhle, etched some 51,000 years ago, is a reminder that they created more than weapons or scrapers. They shaped symbols, carving marks that outlasted the hand that made them. In those strokes lies a hint of imagination, of expression reaching beyond the immediate struggle to live. Fire, clothing, and craft together, they reveal a people shaping their world with both ingenuity and spirit. When we look at the traces Neanderthals left behind, we see more than survival, we glimpse meaning. Pigments such as ochre were not only used to stain artifacts but to adorn burials, hinting at ritual, identity, perhaps even boundaries between groups. To color the body or the dead was to declare something wordless, yet powerful. We belong, we remember, we mark our place in the world. Their artistry stretched further. Portable objects, engraved bones, shell ornaments, stones streaked with pigment speak to a taste for beauty and symbolism. One of the most striking finds is a pebble from Spain, bearing the faint impression of a fingerprint pressed into red ochre some 43,000 years ago. Was it deliberate? An accident? Or a quiet moment of expression? Whatever the intent, it reveals a hand reaching toward the aesthetic, the symbolic, the human. Even the places they chose carry weight. In Bruniquel Cave, Neanderthals arranged stalagmites deep in the darkness where no natural light could reach. To work there required planning, cooperation, and firelight. But why gather in such a place? Perhaps ritual, perhaps community, perhaps both. In the glow of those flames, among the cold stone rings, we sense a people who sought not only to endure, but to connect to each other, to mystery, to something beyond survival. Life for Neanderthals was never fixed in one place. It shifted with the rhythm of the seasons. They followed migrating herds across valleys, turned to roots and plants when the land thawed, and sought out new shelters as weather pressed harder against them. To live was to move, adapting constantly to cycles of cold, warmth, scarcity, and abundance. Archaeological sites like Mandarin Cave in France reveal this ebb and flow of presence. Around 54,000 to 51,700 years ago, the cave shows alternating occupation between Neanderthals and modern humans. The patterns suggest mobility, territory shared or contested, and perhaps moments of uneasy coexistence. Different human groups, drawn to the same shelters, chasing the same prey, leaving overlapping traces in stone and ash. Beneath this mobility lay a profound intimacy with the land. Neanderthals carried mental maps across generations, knowing which water sources never dried, which caves shielded from the fiercest storms, where the best flint could be pried from bedrock. Their world was vast, but it was not random. It was charted in memory, walked into the mind through countless journeys. In every step, every chosen path, we see a people deeply attuned to the landscapes that sustained them. The story of Neanderthals did not end with their disappearance, it lives on in us. Interbreeding between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens is no longer speculation but well-documented fact. Today, nearly every person of non-African ancestry carries between 1 and 2% Neanderthal DNA, a quiet inheritance etched into the human genome. New discoveries suggest these encounters began earlier than once believed. In School Cave, a child dating back some 140,000 years displays a mosaic of traits, some distinctly Neanderthal, others unmistakably Homo sapiens. Such evidence reveals that contact between these groups was not fleeting. It spanned millennia, across shifting landscapes and climates, creating bonds that went far beyond conflict or competition. And what remains of that genetic legacy is not trivial. Certain Neanderthal segments appear to have strengthened immune defenses, tuned skin to new environments, perhaps even shaped how we metabolize food. Their DNA did not vanish with them. It blended into us, carried forward, as part of our shared human story. In a sense, when we look in the mirror, fragments of Neanderthals look back. To understand Neanderthals is to recognize that they were not simply instinct-driven survivors, but thoughtful beings with minds capable of remarkable complexity. Experiments with ancient tar production, a sticky substance used to halve stone tools, reveal this clearly. To create tar, one must plan multiple steps ahead, manage fire carefully, inhibit distractions, and coordinate actions over time. Cognitive scientists note that such tasks demand advanced working memory and executive function, placing Neanderthal thought closer to our own than once imagined. Their cultures, too, carried the stamp of transmission and tradition. Butchering methods differed from region to region, even when hunting the same prey with similar tools. Some groups processed fire differently. Some crafted tools in distinctive styles. These patterns were not random. They were cultural signatures, passed down through generations, markers of identity and belonging. And woven through their practices was an awareness of death. Burials across their range show consistent forms, bodies laid in fetal position, often accompanied by ochre, tools, or symbolic objects. These choices suggest more than practicality. They hint at ritual, at remembrance, at a framework of belief shared among communities. In these gestures of care and ceremony, we see Neanderthals not only as beings who lived, but as beings who reflected, mourned, and remembered. The bones of Neanderthals bear witness to lives of hardship. Fractures, arthritis, worn teeth, and stressed joints tell the story of a people who hunted close to dangerous animals, carried heavy loads, and endured the grind of cold physical survival. Yet many of these injuries healed. The famous Old Man of La Chapelle aux Saints, crippled by severe arthritis, lived long past the point when he could hunt or fight. His survival speaks not of individual toughness alone, but of care of companions who shared food, sheltered him, and saw worth in keeping him alive. Their bodies matured quickly, but their years were often short. Harsh winters, hunger, and exposure to disease likely cut many lives short before what we would call middle age. In an unforgiving Ice Age world, even small wounds could fester, and a failed season of hunting could spell disaster. Beyond biology, other vulnerabilities loomed. Neanderthal populations were scattered in small, isolated groups, making them fragile in the face of change. Climate swung violently, pushing habitats to the edge. New competitors, modern humans, arrived with different strategies, perhaps broader networks, perhaps sharper adaptability. Around 40,000 years ago, the combination of environmental upheaval, thin numbers, and growing pressure may have tipped the balance. The Neanderthals endured for hundreds of thousands of years, but in the end, survival demanded more than resilience. It demanded luck and scale they could not sustain. The decline of the Neanderthals was not a sudden fall, but a long unraveling woven from many threads. The arrival of Homo sapiens brought new pressures, competition for game and shelter, and perhaps outright conflict. Modern humans often traveled in larger groups, carried broader social networks, and seemed to adapt technologies and strategies with a speed that Neanderthals could not easily match. Numbers alone gave sapiens an edge, more hands to hunt, more voices to share knowledge, more resilience when crisis struck. At the same time, the climate shifted brutally. Ice advanced and retreated, reshaping landscapes, erasing familiar habitats, and forcing migrations into ever-narrowing margins of survivable land. Some valleys froze, others dried, and the places Neanderthals had known for millennia grew hostile. To adapt was possible, but costly, and with small, scattered populations, every failure cut deep. Interbreeding, too, played its part. Rather than vanishing in a single moment, Neanderthals were gradually absorbed into expanding human populations. Genetic swamping blurred their lineages, while cultural practices were overtaken by those of the newcomers. What disappeared was not just a people, but a way of being in the world. Yet their end was not pure defeat. Evidence of shared burials, hybrid children, and overlapping lives tells of long interaction rather than sudden replacement. Their disappearance was complex, a blend of loss, absorption, adaptation, and environmental force. They did not vanish in silence. They left echoes in our bones, our blood, and the deep memory of what it means to endure. As we return to the beginning, we see the Neanderthals not as shadows, but as people ancient, resilient, and profoundly human. They carved tools with precision, kindled fire in frozen nights, and adorned their dead with ochre and ritual. They carried compassion in their actions, caring for the injured and disabled. They carried imagination in engravings on bone and marks on cave walls. In every gesture, they remind us that humanity is not only a matter of survival, but of meaning. What they lacked was not courage or intelligence, but scale. Their networks were smaller, their numbers fewer, their innovations slower to spread across vast landscapes. In times of rapid climate swings and new competition, these limits became decisive, yet they did not simply vanish. They endure in fragments of our DNA, in echoes of our symbolic traditions, in the landscapes where they once built fires and raised children. Someone 50,000 years ago pressed a finger into red ochre. Someone knelt by a grave, placing the body of a loved one in fetal rest. These acts remind us that empathy, memory, and art run deeper than our species alone. The Neanderthals are gone, yet through their story, we glimpse ourselves more clearly. Their end was not insignificance, it was transformation. By understanding them, we come closer to understanding what it means to be human. If you followed this journey to the end, pause for a moment and turn the question inward. What parts of ourselves, compassion, art, cooperation, might we be letting slip in the relentless speed of modern life? The Neanderthals remind us that these qualities are not luxuries, but foundations of survival, of belonging, of meaning. And if we lose them, do we not risk forgetting what it truly means to be human? Much of who we are was shaped by them. In our genes, in our rituals, in our instinct to create and to care, the Neanderthals live on. They are not just a vanished species in dusty textbooks, but voices echoing from deep time, asking us to listen. If these echoes move you, I invite you to subscribe to Prehistoric Shadows. Together, we can continue unearthing the stories buried in stone, bone, and memory stories that challenge what we think we know. Share this video with someone who still believes the past was simple, and let us stir the questions that matter most. Thank you for walking into the world of the Neanderthals with us. They were never the brutish caricatures of old myths, but beings of depth, of empathy, of creativity. In their reflection, we see ourselves, and perhaps, if we look closely enough, what we must fight to preserve.